Dallas Cowboys fans, Cowboy Nation, and NFL fans. The Dallas Cowboys are now reportedly not looking for Tyron Smith to return in the 2024-2025 season. This comes as news over the last few days, right before, as the NFL Combine is still going on. Now you're starting to get a look at some of these linemen, some of these receivers, linebackers, running backs, all the tight ends, just anything all across the board. The Cowboys, obviously, the team that they had last year, the disappointing way that the season ended against the Green Bay Packers in the postseason, there are many things to take a look at and potentially could be added to this team in the NFL draft. But now, I guess the way we can kind of finally look at it is the Dallas Cowboys are going to possibly be looking to replace Tyron Smith in the NFL draft if free agency is not the route that they choose. I guess the route or the path that they choose to follow to replace Tyron Smith potentially. I guess I'll call it. When you're looking at Tyron Smith, obviously, I believe joining the team about 2011, 5-time All-Pro last year, second-team All-Pro. This is going to be one of those situations where Tyron Smith is now going to be on the hit free agency, and now you're going to look at teams potentially like the Kansas City Chiefs, teams like that could be looking to bolster what is already obviously an elite team. You're going to now see Tyron Smith finally find his way out, but now obviously it's starting to come out also, I guess you want to say, in addition, that potentially the Cowboys could also look potentially for Tyron Smith to actually return to this team. I guess there's going to be no things where you're not really you're turning every stone, you're trying to see, cross every T, dot every I. Potentially Tyron Smith coming back, we already know what he's been for the Cowboys. Again, just all pro, one of the best tackles, if not the best tackle. You're talking about throughout the years, you're looking at a guy like Jason Peters in his prime, Tyron Smith, Trent Williams. These are the guys that we're looking at as spearheads, as the best left tackles in the entire game. Not just in the division, not in the NFC or anything like that. We're talking about throughout the entire league. These have been the best of the best. And you're talking about Tyron Smith. Over the last few years, I'm going to say 3-4 years ago, that's kind of where the injury issues start to really happen. You're looking at a guy playing 2 games and 4 games. And I guess in a couple seasons in between there, he's played about 11 games. And 13 games, I believe it was last season, something like that. You're looking at a guy in Tyron Smith. The biggest issue with him, obviously, he's playing right next to Tyler Smith, also another guy who was looked at potentially as being a replacement for Tyron Smith. But now we're talking about an all-pro guard himself, Tyler Smith. You're now seeing Tyron Smith. The issue had always kind of started to turn itself into, how many games are we going to get out of Tyron Smith at this point? Obviously, we do know when he does play, he's still very good and he's very serviceable at the very least. But when you're asking yourself in and out of every season, it seems potentially, are we going to have Tyron Smith for the long haul? Are we going to have him for these major important stretch runs of an NFL season that we know these teams and these games, they become very important. We're talking about postseason and playoff seeding and also just the postseason itself. Tyron Smith, we're starting to look at, he's playing a little bit, but he's not really practicing much throughout the week. And some point, in the NFL, I'm going to say, offensive line is the most important thing. The trenches, offensive and defensive lines, to me, are personally the most important things on a team because those are the tone-setting positions. And when you're talking about offensive line, the number one thing about offensive line is what? Guys need to play on a chain. You need everybody on the same page. So what does that mean? You can't be pulling guys in and out of the rotation, out of the lineup, because there's not going to be any consistency grown and development. And you're talking about a left tackle. He needs his left guard. The left guard needs the center and so on. Right guard, right tackle. It's all a line. Like I said, a chain. And Tyron Smith, last year, he did find himself on the field for a major majority of the season, pretty much. So that was a blessing and a good thing to see. But going forward, I guess the questions have kind of always been in the air. And I'm going to say, as a fan, I myself over the last few years especially have thought maybe it is time to move on from Tyron Smith. That doesn't mean we don't appreciate what he's been for the franchise. That doesn't mean we don't appreciate what he's been for the Dallas Cowboys in general overall. But one thing is going to be clear. You're going to have to find some consistency, whether that's in health or whether that's just in production and playability. So Tyron Smith, if he does return, I'll welcome him back clearly, because again, we're still talking about a guy that was second team All-Pro. I believe been in the league 12, 13 years at this point. That's a veteran, but also going in the air. Once he does hit free agency, the Cowboys can't keep him from putting his eyes on any other team, because now again, like you're talking about a team potentially like the Chiefs or some of these the Bengals, teams like this. I'm saying you're just looking around the entire league and saying, who could potentially be looking to just add to what their offensive line is and the strength. So Tyron Smith, if he's not able to return to the Cowboys, we wish him just a great rest of his career, and hopefully he can have some success going forward. But if he is able to return, the Cowboys still, in my personal opinion, should not just view that as the end all be all. We should still be looking to bolster the tackle position. And obviously, I'm going to say, you're looking at a guy like Austin Richards, a guy who potentially could play some major, give us some major results going forward the next couple years, a guy that the Dallas Cowboys found in the draft out of North Carolina last year. But obviously, throwing in the simple fact, Terrence Steele did not play well on the opposite side at right tackle. This was a guy that obviously he dealt with an ACL injury. Returning, you're going to have to get yourself back comfortable, I guess, because one thing you're talking about offensive line, it's knees, it's just the pressure. You're going to have be that solid base and have that solid base. And Terrence Steele, it just seemed as if he could not himself get just comfortable throughout the entire season. We saw so many just swinging open doors. Dak Prescott having to make plays on the run sometimes, and I'm going to say due to that right side of the offensive line. Although we do know Zach Martin, he's not the best of the best of the best of the best anymore to me personally at right guard, but he's very good. We're talking about still top 2, top 3 potentially at the right guard position. This is a very good guy, and we're talking about all pro obviously. But Terrence Steele, if he's not going to be anybody that we're going to see continue to develop, the Cowboys also could look at themselves and say, maybe if we do bring back a Tyron Smith, you're going to have to look in the rest of the line, the rest of that offensive line, and say, now, could we potentially move a guy over to the right tackle position? And now we're going to figure out what we need at left tackle. But now, also, if you're talking about bringing back Tyron Smith, I would bring back a guy that potentially could be the replacement for Tyron Smith. And now, maybe at this juncture, we're going to see a guy that potentially ends up replacing what Terrence Steele does until Tyron Smith is finally out the door. But the Dallas Cowboys, just the fact that they're putting that in the air that Tyron Smith could potentially be out the door in free agency, that is going to be obviously going to perk some ears up, especially nationally, because the Dallas Cowboys, that's one of those most familiar names you're going to say since the Jason Witten, not the Tony Romo era. We're talking about Dez Bryant. These guys, you're talking about Zach Martin, these guys that have been with the team for so long. So again, if Tyron Smith is I guess you want to say on his way out of Dallas and has played his last games, I guess I'll say, for the Dallas Cowboys, we appreciate everything he's done for the franchise. We appreciate everything he's pretty much accomplished, and just being that stalwart at left tackle, because we do know Tyron Smith in his prime, this is the best of the best. Once he gets his hands on you, the play is pretty much over for you. So Tyron Smith, we appreciate you. Hopefully he's able to return if it's at the right price and under the right circumstances. But if not, once again, we appreciate everything Tyron Smith did bring to the Dallas Cowboys. With the new league year officially beginning on March 13th, I believe free agency will completely open up. And to me, going forward, obviously free agency, the Dallas Cowboys are going to have to work some things out. Obviously, Jerry Jones has come out over the last few days and said he wants Dak Prescott to return as a Dallas Cowboys quarterback, but also they're not leaving off the table that Dak could end up playing out this final year of his contract. And we'll see exactly how what that means just going forward. Because one thing is for sure, the Dallas Cowboys, we're going to have to change something. We cannot continue to have these nice solid seasons. And I'm going to say solid seasons because at the end of the day, you can't just sneeze your nose and blow your nose at 12-win seasons, because those are very hard to accomplish, no matter who your opponents are. Because if everybody could do it, it would just happen year in, year out. But at the same time, you're not, I guess when I say you're not ranking yourself based on what you're doing in the postseason, especially not bringing in Mike McCarthy. He was not brought here for the Cowboys to just play during the regular season. Postseason wins, playoff success, getting to a conference championship game. Let's start there. We can't even do that. But getting to a conference championship game, winning a conference championship game, winning a Super Bowl, these are just some of the things that the Dallas Cowboys have tried to put into place, I guess you want to say. But at the end of the day, you're going to say Jerry Jones, Stephen Jones. You can talk all the stuff that you want to say about being all in, trying to put the best teams out there, the best products out there for the fans to be able to embrace and enjoy. But at the end of the day, results are going to be what matters. At the end of the day, you can't put your hands in every single thing. You have to let guys do their jobs. And obviously, we're talking about Will McClay. We do know the claim that he's built up over the last few seasons, just from the draft work that he's done and having a major voice in that draft room that he does. And looking at Mike McCarthy, you're going to have to let these guys, at the end of the day, I'm going to say right now, you're real quick. When you have Jerry Jones, when you have Stephen Jones, obviously they're very vocal. They're talking throughout the media, throughout the entirety of weeks during the regular season, postseason, all that stuff, especially now also the offseason. And to me, there's a certain level you have to do as a front office. You have to not be so much in front of the cameras, I guess you want to say, frequently, because one thing you can also start to see sometimes. Players and coaches, they have got to be on the same page. And when you're looking at players and asking yourself, are they respecting the head coach as much? If they know at the end of the day that you can kind of overstep and go to a Jerry Jones, you can talk to a Stephen Jones over your head coach. To me, that's always going to bring some issues. And those are some of the issues that we have seen over the years dealing with the Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones combination. But when you're going to ask yourself, Now, get these deals done. If Dak Prescott is not able to, I guess you want to say, come back with a new extension, and he ends up just playing out that final year of his contract, now you're looking at other guys, a CeeDee Lamb, but also a guy we want to get this job done. We want to get this contract extension done. Also, when you're looking at a guy like Micah Parsons, you want to get these things done because those, to me, are going to be your core pieces. Those young core pieces for your team going forward. I believe Tony Pollard is also going to be hitting free agency, so the Cowboys are going to have a lot to focus on. And going right into that means the NFL draft will be approaching. The NFL draft is going to be here April 25th to the 27th. And to get there, you have to talk about a little bit what happened in this NFL Combine. It was literally one of those things where you saw so much news floating around players that were looking to boost their stock. Some players with their stock dropping a little bit. I'm going to say personally, I'm a Texas Longhorns fan. This was a weekend for me. You got to see some of these guys that obviously I'm very familiar with, but maybe some of the other people around the league are not, or just other fans around the league potentially that are not as keyed in on Texas or as keyed in, got to see some of these players making some noise. Obviously looking at Adonai or A.D. Mitchell. You're looking at Xavier Worthy, who broke the combine record in the 40-yard dash with a 4.21. Just blowing and blistering speed. These are some players the Cowboys are now going to ask themselves, are these some pieces you could potentially be looking to add to your team? I'm going to say now, I believe what we're looking for potentially could be that opposite guy to play opposite of CeeDee Lamb. I believe Brandon Cooks was the last year of his deal, I believe. I'm obviously going to say right now, I believe Michael Gallup has seen his last days as a Dallas Cowboy. He's going to potentially be one of those June 1st cuts because although he did have some injury issue, and we can always remember when Michael Gallup was a little bit before his injury, unfortunately, it is a business. So you're going to have to be on your P's and Q's when you're talking about just getting this money because at the end of the day, it's about production. And Michael Gallup, he's a great guy. Everybody loves him in the locker room. But again, if you can't stay on the field, and when you are on the field, now we've seen him out there pretty much, I guess you want to say pretty much consistently over the last year or so. He's not the same player he was before, and that's obvious. So the Cowboys could be looking in the draft and asking themselves, are you looking to potentially add a receiver at that 24th spot in the NFL draft upcoming in the first round? I'm not going to say mark out anything because the Cowboys, although you can look in the mix and say, I think a guy like Adonai Mitchell could be a key contributor to this team potentially if you bring him in to play opposite of a CeeDee Lamb. We obviously know what we have in Jake Ferguson, so I'm not going to say you're looking at a tight end position or anything. Obviously taking Luke Schoonmaker, people still not liking that pick last year based on just what we potentially needed for this current roster in this last season. But you're looking at Luke Schoonmaker. He's obviously going to be coming back, and you're hoping to find a major uptick in just his production and just things that he can get done out there. And just being 1 year older in the NFL. Obviously, tight end, to me, like I said, is not going to be a position that you're potentially going to be looking at personally, especially not earlier on anything. So maybe the receiver position, that could be a position that the Cowboys could key in on. Keon Coleman, who had a very disappointing, I guess you want to say 40, I believe running a 4.5, 4.6, something like that. That is one of those things people are now starting to kind of perk up a little bit and say, maybe he's not the kind of player we believed he could be. But at the end of the day, I always say the NFL Combine, that can't be your end-all be-all because at the end of the day, you have to also go look at the film. Keon Coleman is a special player, I believe, and also he comes out and he lets everyone know during this Combine, we're talking about the interview process, that he's also the cousin of CeeDee Lamb and how much he would love to play with guys like that. He talks about he would love to catch balls from a Pat Mahomes or a Josh Allen, and then he throws Dak Prescott in that mix. And again, maybe if you see some of these players, I believe Keon Coleman is a special player if he's in the right position, if he finds himself in the right situation. So the Cowboys, this is going to be very, I guess you want to say very tight. Potentially, also another guy I'm talking about, the Tavondre Sweats, Byron Murphys. This league now, again, we're talking about at the end of the day, as spread out as it is, at the end of the day, the trenches are still very much important. And the Cowboys, we've had some major issue just figuring out what exactly we're going to be going forward, especially on the defensive line, because obviously you had a Jonathan Hankins, you had a Mozzie Smith, who did not reach those goals that potentially everyone hoped he would in this last season, in his rookie season. But there's still room to grow for him. I believe coming in, we're looking at a guy like Dan Quinn. He wanted to drop Mozzie Smith in his weight a little bit, and maybe that was detrimental to what Mozzie Smith actually is, because at the end of the day, when you watched him at University of Michigan, he was a people eater. He's one of those guys that just opens up lanes for everyone else. So asking yourself, is that something we could also focus in I guess I want to say the interior of the defensive line in the upcoming NFL draft. Also, running back Trey Benson is one of those guys potentially. Running back from the Florida State, actually. I don't think this year is one of those years where you're looking at one of those main number one backs. Obviously, you're looking at the last draft. You're looking at guys like Bijan Robinson, and you're looking at a Jahmyr Gibbs. These are some of the guys that were talked about potentially being first-round picks and ended up being first-round picks at the running back position. I don't see one of those guys being one. I guess you want to say just being blatant and eye-popping this year. But you're going to have some very consistent backs in this draft. Like I said, Trey Benson, a Blake Corum out of Michigan, another guy to keep an eye on. The Dallas Cowboys, again, there are so many things that I guess you want to say directions they can take this thing. And I personally want to say, if you're looking at Mike Zimmer, who's looking at just more of a physical aspect and more I guess you want to say more a consistent physical approach to playing, I guess you want to say on the defensive side of the ball. Linebacker is going to be very big, very important going forward. So keep an eye out at the linebacker position going to this draft. Obviously, we'll talk more about some specific players going forward over the next coming days because as the draft, we already know this is a very big time of year. At this point of the offseason, this is where every team in the league feels like they have a chance to be able to make some noise in the next upcoming season, and the Dallas Cowboys are also one of those. So obviously, the salary cap is going to be going up a little bit next year, so that could open up some things, but you also know at the same time, some of these players are going to be asking for a little bit more themselves personally, so that could also chip into what that salary cap increase actually is. So the Cowboys, we have lots of directions we could potentially take. We're going to talk about it a little bit more going forward. Like I said, we're going to talk about potentially some of these potential interior defensive linemen. We're going to talk about some offensive line prospects, receivers, running backs, linebackers. I think personally, safety could be another position that the Cowboys want to keep an eye on because at the end of the day, you have a Malik Hooker. J-Ron Kearse is going to find himself on the way out. But Donovan Wilson, although he did get that extension last year, I believe, 3-year extension, now you're looking at him going into year 2 of that deal. Now ask yourself, is Donovan Wilson going to be a key piece in the safety position for the Cowboys going forward? So I don't think the Cowboys are really marking off too many positions going into the NFL draft. And to me, that's personally exciting because that means we have a lot to talk about and a lot of things that could potentially be something that the Cowboys take a look at. So I appreciate you guys for all the support. Go ahead and like, comment, subscribe, and share. You guys are amazing. And as always, enjoy the rest of your day.